Welcome to Aligned Impact, the podcast where conscious leadership meets bold entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Summer Huntington, and each week we dive deep with founders, innovators, and thought leaders who are rewriting the rules of business from the inside out. Here we talk mindset, brand, content, culture, the real stuff behind building a legacy-driven business that doesn't burn you out. No filters, no fluff, just real conversations that inspire aligned action and intentional impact. If you're a visionary leader ready to create with purpose, grow with integrity, and lead with your heart, you're in the right place. Let's get into it.
It's so individualized. It really depends, like how much have they already been doing before this? You know, have they been in some sort of form of self-inquiry for a long period of time? How much self-awareness do they have? How many resources have they built within themselves through mindfulness, breath work?
Please give a warm welcome to Gina Gratza, who is the owner of Gina Gratza Coaching. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a licensed Psilocybin facilitator in Oregon State. Thank you so much, Gina, for being on Aligned Impact podcast.
Oh, thank you. It's a joy to be here.
So I recently met Gina this summer out at Imagine Festival, which is a festival on Orcas Island in the Pacific Northwest, and she was facilitating a workshop, which I had the pleasure of attending, and I'm really, really excited to dive into your work today, Gina.
I loved that workshop. That was such a wonderful festival. Shout out to Imagine, and I'm so glad to be here to talk to you more about it.
Amazing. So you do quite a few different types of facilitation and healing, and I really just want to start with just addressing where you came into this work. So my question for you is, in your work at the intersection of trauma healing, embodiment, and psychedelic facilitation, can you share what personally and professionally drew you into this work and how your background really shaped the way you approach psychedelics?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it really started in 2007 when I went to my first party, which was Burning Man, which is where I had my first experience with psychedelics. It happened to also be the same time that I returned to school to become a therapist. And so those journeys really paralleled one another throughout my life. In experiencing psychedelics at Burning Man, consciousness expanded, heart grew to love so many people. Big experiences were happening while also becoming trained in the psychology of the mind and working with people and healing relationships. And as I was going into graduate school, I started to follow the work of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. Started attending conferences, later went on to be trained by MAPS in working with MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD, and then was also, upon graduating, expanding my teachings, learnings in complex trauma. And I was also interning at a treatment center for eating disorders, which was inspired to work with women in low self-worth. And really, over the course of, 10, 15 years, that has all brought me to where I am today in serving women, working with complex trauma, and incorporating psychedelics when it's appropriate.
I remember our conversation at Imagine where you're so educated on the topic, and it's not really often that you meet somebody as well educated in both realms. Can you tell us a little bit about just your academic research specifically with psychedelics? Because I feel like that will add just so much more depth to this conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was in school, there was no specific schooling in graduate form like there is today in pursuing the path of psychedelics or expanded state of consciousness work. Like perhaps maybe in private schools, but really it was more about going and attending the conferences and following maybe the 2 universities around the world that were doing psychedelic research. Most notably was Johns Hopkins University, and then there was the Imperial College in London that was revealing some research. And the pursuing of MDMA and psilocybin assisted therapy for the treatment of PTSD and depression and anxiety, the research allowed people to see, there is possibility here, efficacy here to show the relief of these symptoms and improve quality of life, so much so that it was titled a breakthrough therapy by the FDA. It gave a lot of encouragement and inspiration to more and more people Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, really brought people to understand what is happening in the works behind the scenes that people aren't aware of about research. It got more attention to it, which got more funding, which got more research happening. I was fortunate enough to participate in research here from the social and neuroscience and psychotherapy lab, where we conducted research with MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD in group therapy with veterans. And that should be out soon, that paper. But it was really profound and really beautiful to be pursuing this for 10 years and be a part of research. And all the above ground, which means not hidden in the underground, ways of working with psychedelics like ketamine assisted therapy, I've been a part of, and psilocybin assisted facilitation in Oregon legally.
Wow. You're definitely one of the most well-educated, and you have the most depth of your knowledge that I've met. So I just feel like women, especially if you are wanting to work with Gina, it just puts my nervous system at ease to know that when I know at some point I'm going to be working with you, when I do dive in, that I'm really working with somebody that has been through the research, has been doing this for over a decade, and just really was at the ground level at the beginning when it started to become legal in the United States.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a beautiful journey.
Yeah. And it's just, I feel like we're just getting started too.
Absolutely.
So the word psychedelic, which was coined by Humphrey Osmond as a mind manifesting tool, means very different things to different people. How do you define psychedelic experiences, especially beyond substances, and why is that reframing important for healing?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. I like to think about psychedelics as, consciousness expanded, the ability to expand one's awareness outside of the default mode network, which is this like rigid structure that we continuously play upon. When we have experiences that take us out of the ordinary life, I think they're psychedelic. I think they are altered in many ways. Like, I believe grief work creates altered states experiences. Grief ritual work is another specialty and domain that has greeted my life from personal experience of so much grief. And then I went on to get trained in grief ritual with Francis Weller and mentoring with Lawrence Cole. And that work without substances creates an expanded state of awareness. You are altered when you are grieving. Same with float tanks and dance and meditations, other forms of rituals. You don't need substances or psychedelics or plant medicines to expand consciousness. I think you can experience it in many different ways if you're willing and open to be moved by life's myriad of experiences, be it through emotions or shifts of perception.
Absolutely. I've been earning my certification in breath work and doing a lot of holotropic breath work and just attending various breath workshops, usually 2 to 3 times a month, and having very altered states through, 40 minutes of breath work can elicit kind of a similar DMT response.
Oh, yeah.
Which
Oh,
is
yeah.
wild.
Powerful.
All right, so I want to dive into kind of the populations that you work with, and I know a lot of mainstream conversation focuses on what psychedelics can do to the brain. How do you bring the body, nervous system, and meaning making into conversation, especially for people healing trauma and disordered eating?
Yeah, so I appreciate all the science and neurobiology. It helps a lot of people regulate their nervous systems to feel like this is something they can embark upon. And for many people, it's healing what the war on drugs did to our mind when it comes to having an opinion about psychedelics. There was a lot of harm caused by the war on drugs in the 60s about what psychedelics do. And there were so many myths about it. So it made a lot of people afraid. Am I going to fry my brain? Am I going to break my brain? Will this cause me to go crazy? And there was so much fear cultivated around not trusting your own ability to be with your consciousness when it expands. And so I think when working with trauma, it's really important to build tools for resourcing, skills for regulating the nervous system, and most importantly, a relationship between you and the facilitator holding space with you. If your nervous system doesn't quite feel like the person holding space for you knows what they're doing, has your back in the moment of crisis, doesn't understand the many layers of trauma that may emerge or come up. You know, people who are working in healing trauma may experience the reliving of some memories of the past, or some other somatic experience of trauma from the past that they may or may not have known about. So to have a facilitator who understands the dimensionality of trauma can help a nervous system feel safe and supported, versus if somebody does not know that terrain and doesn't know how to support that expression, it could be really harmful to somebody. So psychedelics, you know, I feel like they offer us an opportunity to be intimate with ourselves in the many layers that we are working on repairing or reparenting or remembering when it comes to whole body wellness. So mind, body, spirit. It's not just about fixing, quote, fixing the mind, but it's also about like, how do I live in my body without criticism or shame? How can I appreciate this vessel that has taken me through so much, even the trauma? Like it's the first line of defense to protect itself psychologically, physically. And I feel like, you know, science will show us that psychedelics have the power of softening amygdalas and bringing forth more compassion for ourselves, or a different perspective or way of looking at one's injuries through a different lens of observation without criticism or critiquing. So I think more compassion and curiosity.
Do you get into, I'm a big proponent for a flow state, which turns off your front brain. Do you get into the hypofrontality where you turn off the inner critic in some of these experiences?
Well, I really think that psychedelic facilitation in the moment, we really take a step back as facilitators and let the negotiation between the plant medicine or psychedelic and the person have a relationship together. It's not a time for us to insert any interventions or direction, but rather the encouragement, support of the inner healing intelligence within each individual to build relationship to the medicine. And we're totally there should crisis emerge, should support be needed, should touch be requested or desired, or connection in some way. But a lot of it is like learning how to be with yourself and listen to what's being spoken within or around. And then the integration would be like after the medicine is completed and days, weeks go by, then the integration work comes. And that would be a really great place for flow state, for movement, for meaning making, for dance, for song, for creative integration, you know?
Love it. Well, thank you for specifying that. I feel like my brain as a scientist always wants to go to like, what's happening, you know, but I think when you're in the experience, it's so important to just be in the experience and not try to turn it into a scientific moment.
Yeah, in fact, it's like we spend so much of our lives in our heads all the time that if you get a chance in medicine to be in a different state of consciousness, savor it, enjoy it. Don't get too heady. Don't try to make meaning of it immediately. Don't try to figure out what you need to do in your life to sustain this. Like, you'll have time for that. Like, enjoy the sweet spot of being in a place of expansion. That's very different than waking life.
Yeah, expansion versus retraction. That's a big topic that I've been exploring as of late, is how can we do things or be in situations or facilitate the idea of expansion in the body and in the soma over retraction or fear, and just looking at like dense energy versus light energy, the shame energy being dense, and then the work that you do just encouraging that more expansive energy.
Yeah, and both are needed too, right? Like the inhale and the exhale are both that contraction and expansion together. And the contraction lets us know when something is asking for our attention. But I believe over time, when you're working on healing trauma, the contraction isn't so much that you're so small you forget the shape and form of who you are. The contraction becomes more form-fitting to alert you of what is asking for concentrated attention, for protection, or for vocalization, or for boundaries, or for, activism, or whatever it might be.
I can tell you're just so passionate about this work.
Yeah.
So Gina helped design Oregon State compliant psilocybin facilitator training through, I believe it was InnerTrek, correct? Okay.
Yeah, supported the curriculum of that.
So what do you believe true safety actually looks like in psychedelic assisted work, emotionally, relationally, and somatically?
Assessment really is absolutely key, like really assessing someone's readiness. And that includes screening protocols, exploring people's support networks, things that support stability in their life. One of the questions I always ask people is if they're in a place in their life where they could handle instability, because you don't know what may emerge in a psilocybin journey, and it may throw them off. And are they in a place that could manage that? And then what do their support networks look like? What does the preparation look like too? So it's really going slow. Sometimes people will reach out and they'll be like, oh, I want to do a psilocybin session in 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh, I'm not your person, because this is something that we take time to really prepare for, to create the most opportunity for safety. If you rush into these experiences without true assessment and preparation, there's more space for possible harm and injury and fragmentation and more harm, especially if somebody's coming in with trauma.
So how long does it take usually to prepare somebody for a journey like that? What's your estimated time? Or is it
It's
vary?
so individualized. It really depends, like how much have they already been doing before this? Have they been in some sort of form of self-inquiry for a long period of time? How much self-awareness do they have? How many resources have they built within themselves through mindfulness, breath work, therapy coaching? Will determine the length. But usually if somebody reaches out and let's just say they've been doing their work, they're curious to explore, maybe they have a therapist already, they've been talking about wanting to do this for a year, and we reach out, turns out that they medically and mentally are screened to move forward, then perhaps within a month or two, longer than a month, we prepare. That way we can have our intake session. That really lets us know if we're going to need multiple preparation sessions or just one, and then the full day administration session, and then definitely one integration session, preferably a few, but however much they want to continue on that process.
Nice. And that actually brings me to my next question about your group facilitated work. So I know you facilitate both individual and group experiences. What is uniquely powerful about group psychedelic or ceremonial spaces that you lead, especially for women, maybe who've experienced trauma or disconnection from their bodies?
Yeah, I love group work so much. I think it's so powerful, so special. I think a lot of people in the beginning are really nervous that they don't want to have that experience in front of people. But when you're in the medicine, when you're in the work, you both are aware that there's people in the room, but like you're so deep in your own process. And when we're in a circle together and you hear someone across the room crying or someone across the room, moving through a difficult process, it brings up something in you about your relationship to crying or your relationship to anger or your empathy for that person's struggle. And it brings in the humanness and the connection that we have to one another, whether we're examining our own internal difficulties around crying in public or anger or processes. Like, we're just mirrors reflecting off of one another, reminding ourselves of the collective work that we're doing when we're in circle, that we're not alone and that we're in this together. And with women, I love women's circles. I've been facilitating those for a couple years. And women, I find, often will wail together and let it be released, and then they'll be laughing, and then they'll be crying, and then they exchange numbers at the end of the retreat, and they stay in touch for years. Like, there's so much love and connection that comes home to women when they're in circle with each other. There's this remembrance of, like, we used to do this all the time. I miss being in circles with women. So it feels like the restoration of ancient medicine when women are together in circle.
That's amazing. Can you tell us if you have any coming up, or just how one would be able to find your group facilitated work?
Yeah, absolutely. So for sure, sign up for my newsletter. That's how I keep people updated on upcoming offerings. But the one that I have working right now that fills up, or that starts February 25th, is called Sacred Nourishment. And it's really supporting women coming back home to their relationship to their body and food. And it's going to have 2 separate overnight retreat weekends with psilocybin. So it's a 12-week/year-long offering. Year-long because we'll have seasonal integrations. It's going to be online, where we'll explore the heroine's journey. And then we'll have 2 separate in-person overnight retreats with psilocybin at a beautiful location in the woods. It's quite lovely. And so that's the biggest one right now.
Amazing. And is the retreat center the place that you have it? Is it in Oregon State?
It's in Oregon, yeah, just about 45 minutes outside Portland, Oregon.
Nice. I'm
Yeah.
always so curious about these because I'm on a few different newsletters where I get invited to various things like this, and I'm just so curious what it even looks like to be away on a retreat doing this work. Like, have you done facilitated work at these venues before?
Yeah.
Like, what's it?
Yeah.
Can you just paint us a picture of the location for the weekend ones?
It's so delightful. It's so delightful. And she's updating the property. So it's a woman-owned business too, which I love supporting. It's like a cottage home that has a fireplace, a large table for sharing meals and cooking together. And then there's these couple rooms upstairs, but then there's individualized cabins on the property as well for people to have their own space. And then we journey in like an updated, furnished, separate building that has the journey room space. So we walk to and from the house to have that delineation, separation of the journey space and the home in which you're staying in. And it's surrounded by trees with a river nearby. Like, it's just it feels off grid, away from cars and traffic in cities. And for women, it's really important, these overnight experiences, because when we have to go home after a journey, oftentimes what's waiting for women is responsibilities or parenting or, fill in the blank. So it's really nice for women to just be taken care of. And me and my, facilitators, we love to take care, right? That's what we're there for, is to really support a letting go and letting into people being with themselves, women being with their healing experience in a collective and internally.
Yeah. And how many women generally come to the group retreats?
About 8, give or take. Okay. Yeah. The Sacred Nourishment, we're opening it to 10 women, but typically maybe 8. Yeah.
Amazing. Sounds very intimate.
It's very intimate. Yeah.
So you often speak about helping people move beyond survival and into agency, creativity, and embodied truth. What do you see shift in women when that transition begins to happen internally and relationally?
Our survival responses are formed from a place of contraction and fear. So when we create spaciousness in the body through resources that create more expansion, expanding that window of tolerance, expanding our capacity to hold more pain or difficulty or struggle, to hold ourselves. It creates this like opening. And even as I said that, I heard you take a breath. So when we take a breath, there's just like the chest opens, the shoulders go back. And I often think of the throat. All of the women I work with, so many of them talk about the lump in the throat. And this is so sacred for all of us, for myself included. It's been such a journey to liberate the voice, whether through a scream or through the boundaries that we communicate. There's so much like, ancestral trauma here for us, for all that we've endured through, the witch trials and being murdered for our truths. We've learned to adapt by shrinking, and the healing journey is thereby expanding and vocalizing through song, through wailing, through reclamation of our boundaries and what we're no longer standing for. It begins to be a bit of a social justice movement too, in the liberation of the feminine gifts that live inside of us. Intuition, felt sense knowing, nurturance, protection, fierce protection, compassion and care. Yeah.
I definitely have to chime in on that one. We've been taking women out into these like 7-day training retreats and teaching them to basically embody the warrior, and the work that you're doing with liberating women's voices and getting them to feel empowered and expand their capacity. I'm very in line with that work too, and just seeing how much we can do in such a short amount of intentional time, guiding them through. It's really cool.
Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you. It's so needed. And I feel like, I don't know if the algorithm just has me pegged, but I feel like I see more and more women just being like flipping tables and saying, come on, ladies, let's rise up. Let's rise back into our power. And more women are like supporting businesses and getting involved in practices that are helping us rise back up.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a whole movement right now, and it's great to see what happens when women are creating businesses or coaching. I see a lot of coaching businesses in my algorithm, but they're doing a lot of really good with the world and empowering others too, and just helping us to understand this vessel more.
Yes.
My next question for you is around integration, where the real work begins. So many people are drawn to like peak or far out experiences with psychedelics, but you really emphasize integration, which I think is awesome, and we need more of that. What do you feel like good integration actually looks like, and why is it essential for long-term healing rather than just like temporary insights from the psychedelics?
Yeah. So integration is so much of the work. I would say it's the biggest part of it, because without it, you're just chasing peak experiences. And that can be its own form of distraction. So you have a peak experience, whatever it may have been with. And then what do you do with it? How does it change or shape your life as you move forward, walking soberly, without these peak experiences? And you may remember I spoke about this in my workshop at Imagine and Oregon Country Fair. So this acronym that I created is called BEAMS. And I really like to think about integration through this acronym. B stands for body. And were there any messages that came through to you in your peak experience that was inviting you to be in your body? Maybe stretching more, or yoga, or going to the doctors because you've been putting something off out of fear, or just feeling your body, or just breathing into the belly. Maybe there was a message from your journey that wanted you to be in the body. The first E is the emotions. So maybe you spent a lot of time crying in your journey. It doesn't mean that that's done. It doesn't mean like, okay, all done. I did my grief. It's like, no, you got intimate and really close to your grief. How can you continue to massage this beautiful messenger of grief? Maybe it's joining a grief ritual. Maybe it's reading more about grief work. Maybe it's joining grief support groups. Some sort of way to continue to be in the dance of whatever emotion greeted your attention. Then the next E is expression, and this is where creativity lives. I've had so many journeys where it's like, sing, Gina, just sing, just doesn't matter if you sound like whatever, just let your voice be heard. It's ancient medicine. This is also painting or collage or learning an instrument or dancing. So express yourself. And integration loves expression because it's nonverbal. And that's really nice to not get so heady. Then the M is mind. And this is the part of ourselves that can get really fraught with negative self-talk, criticism, putting ourselves down, comparing ourselves. So really getting a hold of your mind, maybe it's through therapy with integration work, and understanding, how do I learn to speak to myself with more kindness and compassion? Because that ultimately will make life so much more easeful. And it is a matter of shifting perspective. It is a matter of healing the early childhood beliefs that got indoctrinated from childhood. I do not believe that we are born with negative self-image. That is a cultural construct that was put upon us at a young age. So doing our work to heal that is major. And then S for spirit. This one invites us to be in relationship to spirit, however you define it, through the universe, source, nature, creating a practice of prayer or devotion, or learning more about different philosophical frameworks, Taoism, Buddhism, Christianity, whatever floats your boat, whatever calls to you, is inviting you to go deeper into a practice of reverence, of deep love.
As you were sharing that, I got the visual of you and your friend who was co-facilitating with you, who was weaving she was weaving these like brightly colored, like she had a loom, and you
Yeah.
just got that little flashback. But there was a meaning behind the weaving too, and that you weave in so much of this with the beams and the integration, and it's just a very well-rounded experience.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. That was such a treat to have her in the background demonstrating integration, because that was something that came to her, was the desire to create more through weaving, which is ancient medicine to the feminine as well. We were weaving for centuries. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very calming too, just to be in that state, working and weaving and working with your hands. I want to dive into your program, the Sacred Nourishment program. So I'm curious, the word nourishment carries layers like physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual. How does sacred nourishment show up in your program, especially for women healing trauma or disordered relationships with their body?
Yeah. So my colleague, Dr. Sarah Santel, and we've actually been friends and colleagues for 10 years. We worked together when I was I was working at a treatment center for eating disorders, and I would need to create an outpatient team for my clients leaving treatment. And she was one of the providers I used to refer to. So flash forward years later, we both psilocybin facilitators, and we were like, we need to create a program for women who are healing their relationship to food and body. When people are in the process of recovery from disordered eating, one of the last things to come really is this body acceptance piece, because there's so much conditioning about what our bodies are supposed to look like or be from a toxic patriarchal society. Longer story, but I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. And so we wanted to frame this through the heroine's journey. And the heroine's journey was brought to us by Maureen Murdoch, whereas the hero's journey was brought to us by Joseph Campbell. And the hero's journey is more popularly known. But that one is really centered around, being separated and then having a conquest and then achieving and then returning with, some sort of power. Whereas the heroine's journey is about finding connection again from to the feminine after being disconnected from it for so long. There's an identity fragmentation that happens between our connection to our body and emotions. And so we have to descend like Inanna into the underworld and recover lost aspects of ourselves, including our emotions and our body. And then we come back, reclaim, and we also rebalance the masculine and feminine within, and thereby moving forward in integration. So it's really about becoming whole again within. So rediscovering and reclaiming all the things within yourself as your story and as your truth, not hearing the noise from the outside world. So with reclaiming a new story for our bodies, and food is also like learning how to nourish ourselves. And every body is different because every body has a different story, trauma, genetics. So we can't use any single framework to say this is how your body has to be, but rather like intuitive eating and also listening to the body sensations. You know, what is my body communicating to me? Is this emotional fullness or is this physical fullness? Is this emotional hunger or is this physical hunger? And how can I trust? And oh, if I get distracted or oh, I get overwhelmed with this emotion, how can I remember that this emotion will move through? And maybe I can help this emotion move through with dancing this grief. And so it's really learning how to bring in more fluid gestures of being with ourselves rather than cutting off and disowning and judging, but calling home and befriending and loving and moving with it in a dance of sorts. Yeah.
And where can we find out about applying for this, or what's the process in the event somebody's listening? It's like, I definitely want to come to do the sacred nourishment it's like a year-long program. It's, it's 12 weeks intensive and then followed by like a year of integration, or the rest of the year of integration.
Yeah, well, reach out to me. What we are doing is we're doing a consultation to explore fit, and then we'll do an intake call to deepen that fit, because the consult call is just, free discovery call. And then we'll do an intake call, and then we will decide if this is the right fit for you. We really are being thoughtful about this group because there's so many layers that will be diving deep. And so we want to make sure that people feel ready for it and that the container feels good to all. But we are very excited about this. This has been tended to for almost 2 years now, and we're finally ready to unveil it. And we're still taking applications, so this timing is perfect. And you can find information on ginagratza.com and on my Instagram. And there you go.
And this podcast, the show notes should have her website as well. So who tends to be most drawn to this work and the 12-week journey? Just curious, what type of women? Like, is it for midlife women, young women? I know it's not just people that struggle with disordered eating. It's like more, people that want to nourish themselves well. If you want to go into that, who it's for.
Yeah, I think it's for women who are tired of feeling disembodied. Women who are ready to reclaim reconnection to all aspects of self. I know more people walking in this world with disordered relationship to food and body than people know. There are so many because our culture is constantly enforcing thin ideals, diet culture mentality, fat shaming, and all the ways in which women need to change their appearances to be accepted in a society that really has unrealistic expectations that distract us from our power and take our money. And so there's a lot of women that are, disembodied from feeling themselves in a good way without comparison. So this program is for women who are ready to relinquish that and say yes to a different way of being connected to themselves without the influence of the toxic patriarchy.
Love it. It sounds like a women's empowerment to the next level with the psychedelics, with the integration, with Women's Circle. That sounds like a really beautiful offering. I'm so excited for this to launch, and I'm sure you'll do many others. I would imagine it's a big piece of your body of work.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, my final question. For the women who are listening who feel the pull toward deeper healing, embodiment, or expanded consciousness, but also might feel a little hesitant or unsure, especially pertaining to like psychedelic journeys, what would you want her to know as she considers taking that first step?
I first just want to celebrate her and say, yay, welcome. It's a beautiful journey. It's worth it. You're worth investing in. And whatever that means, you're worth investing the time, the energy, the money, the thoughts. Like, yes to yourself. Listen to your body. Trust your inner knowing. If you don't know your inner knowing, trust the path that's bringing you closer to it. And find the people that resonate with your heart and that are doing the work that inspires you. Let those people be your teachers and let it guide you to the next thing. And I fully believe that when we come home to listening to our intuition and felt sense, it brings us to where we want to be next.
Spoken with so much authority and conscious invitation to allow people to just love themselves and celebrate themselves. Well, thank you so much, Gina, for being on Aligned Impact. It's a pleasure to have you, and I cannot wait for our next conversation.
Thank you so much, Summer, for this opportunity, and thank you to all the listeners for tuning in, and really grateful. Be well.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Aligned Impact. I'm truly grateful to have you here in this growing community of leaders, innovators, and conscious change makers. Check the show notes for all the links and resources we mentioned today, and you can explore more of my work and programs over at flowshala.com or connect with me on social media at Summer Huntington and YouTube as well for behind the scenes movement inspiration and business tips. Stay tuned for more episodes of Aligned Impact that inspire you to lead with intention, get empowered, and create aligned impact in your life and your community.